The old house stood at the edge of town, a crooked for sale sign leaning beside a rusted pickup truck. As the young woman approached and touched the wooden door carved with strange markings, it clicked, like a lock being awakened. For a moment, the entire main street went silent. A cracked window reflected a faint shadow that vanished instantly, shutters slamming shut as if afraid to be seen. Dust swirled in a narrow shaft of light, hiding something beneath. The house seemed worthless, but it held a secret that had kept the whole town trembling for years. The young woman stood before her uncle's wooden house, the door leaning, the porch roof rusted through. Childhood memories flooded back, summers running circles around the yard, her uncle rocking silently in his chair, eyes clouded with worry rather than peace. Back then, she didn't understand. Now, holding the key, she saw that look for what it was, a warning left unsaid. She crossed the yard, where an old Ford truck lay sunken in moss, tires flat to the rim. The for sale sign leaned crooked, its letters fading in the wind. Pushing against the marked door, the hinges screeched, the sound crawling up her spine. Inside, the air was thick and stale. A torn curtain stirred faintly beside a clock frozen since the 1980s, its hands stuck forever on a meaningless hour. On the dust-covered table lay a faded photo, her uncle standing beside the truck, his face unsmiling, his eyes heavy. She picked it up, unsettled. Something about this house had never been told. She began to clean. The broken chair creaked, and dust swirled in the thin light. From under the table, a folded scrap of paper slipped free. The handwriting was shaky, rushed. "Don't trust anyone here." Her hand trembled as she read it, the words bridging directly to the uncle she had lost. Her pulse quickened. She searched further. The floor groaned differently beneath her step in the center of the room. Kneeling, she noticed planks that didn't match the rest. They were fitted too tightly, sealed with a black resin that hardened over time. She tapped lightly. The hollow echo confirmed a space below. She didn't stop. Grabbing a rusted crowbar from the corner, she began prying. The boards clung stubbornly, as if unwilling to release their secret. Sweat slid down her temple. Her hand scraped raw against the metal, but she kept working. At last, the brittle resin cracked away. With a final pull, a board gave way, exposing a dark cavity. Inside rested an old iron chest. Its corners were worn down and the lock corroded, but it was solid. She heaved it up, the clang of metal on wood heavy and final. Her heart clenched. This wasn't something forgotten. It had been buried with intent, meant never to be found. She set the chest on the table. Her uncle's note seemed to echo in the silence. "Don't trust anyone here." Now she understood. The house wasn't just property to sell. It was a doorway into a secret her uncle had, carried to his grave, one now demanding to be uncovered. The next morning, she carried the papers and the chest to the small town bank downtown. The weathered sign creaked in the breeze, and the door chime jingled as she entered. Inside, silence lingered. A few older men sat in the corner, coffee cold in their mugs. Their eyes flicked briefly to the chest in her arms, then darted away, as if 1 second too long might spell trouble. The bank manager, a thin man with silver-rimmed glasses, stepped out from behind. He took the papers, flipping slowly. His hand froze at a page stamped with a red seal. He inhaled sharply, closed the folder, and slid it back toward her. Before turning away, he discreetly pushed a small folded note across the counter. His whisper shook. "You shouldn't be involved in this." She gripped the note tightly. Only a few jagged words appeared when she unfolded it. Leave before it's too late. The air thickened. A man by the window clutched the handle of his hoe, staring down at the floor, sweat beading his brow. Near the counter, an older woman dropped her basket. A ball of yarn rolled to the young woman's feet. When their eyes met, the woman's gaze filled with fear, then darted away. Leaving the bank, she passed an old diner where a few men sat silently at wooden tables. The clink of a spoon against a mug rang unnaturally loud. Every head turned toward the chest in her arms, then quickly looked away, as if they had glimpsed a curse. She walked faster, feeling every glance from every window prick her back like needles. Wind whipped down the narrow street, yanking her hair, rattling the crooked for sale sign outside the diner. When she reached the house, she froze at the porch. The for sale notice from the day before was gone. Shredded pieces littered the dirt, the handwriting smeared and torn. Someone had been here, leaving a message. She knelt, picking up one jagged scrap. Among the ripped edges, scrawled in pencil across the margin, were words that made her blood run cold. Stop, or you'll end up like him. Her fist clenched, the paper crumpling tight. Her heart raced, but this time fear wasn't alone. In her chest, a spark began to burn. If this town trembled at a house and an old chest, then whatever was inside mattered more than anyone dared admit. She stepped inside and set the chest on the table. The lantern light glinted off the rusted metal. The warning note slipped to the floor. In the silence, she whispered to herself. Her uncle had guarded this secret until death. Now it was her turn to decide if it would stay buried or finally come to light. Night fell over the town, fog creeping across the low wooden rooftops, swallowing the street whole. Inside the old house, the oil lamp cast a weak yellow glow. She sat beside the iron chest, the warning note still on the table. Outside, the sound of insects mixed with the whistling wind, forming a chilling chorus. Unable to bear the silence, she threw on a coat and stepped outside. The main street was deserted. A few windows glowed faintly, but as she passed, whispered voices cut off. An older woman sat hunched in front of the dress shop, a faded scarf flapping in the breeze. She stared hard, suddenly reaching out and gripping the young woman's wrist. The hand trembled but held firm. "You have to stop," the old woman rasped, her voice rough but each word sharp. "Your uncle tried to bring the truth into the light. They made him silent forever. If you keep going, you'll be next." The young woman froze, breath caught, eyes wide. Before she could ask, the older woman let go, pulled the scarf across her face, and slipped inside the shop, locking the door behind her. The words pounded in her head, heavy as stone. She hurried back toward the house, heart racing, but when she opened the door, she stopped cold. A dagger was driven deep into the wooden frame beside the handle, the blade still quivering. Someone had been here, close enough to touch the door, and left a warning. Drawing a sharp breath, she squeezed the knife, gripping it tight. Fear twisted into resolve. She lit the lamp and began searching the house. Every shadow, every shelf could be hiding a clue. Behind a dust-coated painting, she discovered a small envelope pressed flat against the wall. The paper had yellowed, the ink smeared halfway across the page, but a few lines remained. "You can't trust anyone here. If this reaches you, know that I did not leave by choice." Her hand shook, tears welling. The unfinished words felt torn, like her uncle's life cut short. Outside, hoofbeats echoed steadily down the street. She doused the lamp and peered through a crack in the window. Through the fog, A figure stood by the lamppost, motionless, eyes fixed on the house. She hugged the chest to her chest, heartbeat thundering. For a moment, she asked herself, was she walking the same doomed path her uncle once had? A path with only one end? But she tightened her grip when she glanced at the dagger that had pierced her door. That shadow outside only made her more certain. The secret was terrifying, but that was precisely why it had to be exposed. And if the whole town chose silence, she would be the first to break it. The next morning, pale sunlight filtered through torn curtains, dust drifting in dull beams. She sat before the iron chest, the scratches on her hand still raw from wrestling with the knife the night before. The rusted lock looked almost defiant. Taking a deep breath, she jammed the old crowbar into the seam. Metal screeched, sparks flying. This time the sharp edge sliced her skin, blood welling red at her fingertips, but she didn't stop. With a dry snap, the lock gave way and the lid sprang open. Inside were bundles of papers tied with frayed cloth. The smell of mildew rose, mingling with the scent of her blood. She untied the cord and opened the first page. The words leapt out. Land transfer contract, Miller family. The second, Brown family, land sold twice. The third, the same red seal, identical to the town's official stamp, repeated across dozens of documents. Her pulse raced as she flipped faster. One page held a handwritten note. Do not let the seal fall into the wrong hands. All of it is fake. At the bottom of the chest lay a thick leather journal. Shaky but firm, her uncle's handwriting filled the first page. They won't let me live if I speak. If you find this, know the truth. This entire town is built on stolen land. The red seal at the bank is the key tears welled, but not just from fear. She saw her mother's name on one page, signed away in a forged contract. The family's land was stolen under a counterfeit signature. The final piece clicked. Her uncle hadn't just been protecting the community. He had been protecting their family. She clutched the journal, breath ragged. The pain in her chest hardened into resolve. This was no longer just about the past. It was carved into her own bloodline. Suddenly, glass shattered at the back door with a crash. She jerked upright, clutching her chest. Cold air rushed in, curtains whipping. A whisper slithered through the crack in the dim light. You've seen too much. Headlights flared in the yard, slicing across the window, then blinked out, leaving only heavy darkness. Her heart hammered in her throat. Someone had stepped into the yard, close enough to know she had opened the chest. She gripped the journal tighter, blood dripping onto its pages. In that instant, she understood. The game of silence was over. From now on, they wouldn't just watch. They would act. Gray rain poured that afternoon, drumming hard against the rusted tin roof. The young woman sat at the table, papers spread before her. The forged contracts, the repeated red seals, it was all too clear. But at the bottom of the chest remained one bundle, wrapped tightly in brown cloth and bound with a black cord. Her hands shook as she untied it, heart pounding. Inside were thick file folders, the ink on the pages still sharp. The first page made her gasp, an internal memorandum, signed by the region's highest official. Beneath it ran a list of payouts, each family's name, the amount, and beside it, a cold note. Duplicate sale. Keep silent. She flipped faster, blood smearing from the cut on her hand. One page sent a chill down her spine. Deal with Samuel before he transfers the files. At the bottom was a signature she knew too well. She dropped the page, breath caught. Her uncle hadn't died by chance. His death had been ordered, written in the hand of power. Suddenly, heavy knocks pounded on the front door. She slammed the chest shut, heart leaping to her throat. When she opened the door, a man in a dark coat stood in the rain. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, water running down his chin. Without a word, he held out a damp note, ink blurred but legible. Sell the house. Forget it. Or follow him. She clenched the paper, eyes locked on him, but he turned and walked away, his figure swallowed by the storm. Inside, fear twisted in her chest. Yet with it rose a new fire. Justice. Her uncle had died to preserve these pages. If she backed down now, his death would mean nothing. She sat, reopening the leather journal. His words bled through between stained pages. If someone finds this, remember, the truth must not be buried with me. Don't let them steal another generation. Outside, thunder rolled. The window panes rattled. She looked at the stack of files, her eyes burning with resolve. Tonight, the secret was no longer a secret. The truth had escaped the chest, and they knew it. There was nowhere left for shadows to hide. From this moment, the enemy would show its face, and the fight her uncle once began had now fallen to her. The next morning, the sky hung gray and heavy, the town cloaked in an eerie hush. The young woman clutched her chest and walked toward the red brick courthouse. Townsfolk glanced her way along the street, but quickly looked down, as if afraid to be seen. Inside the lamplit office, Judge William Crane, the man the town respected above all, was already waiting. His long coat pressed neatly, his silver hair combed back, his smile calm and measured. "I hear you found what your uncle left behind," he said, his voice low and steady, more a reminder than a question. She set the chest down, eyes fixed on him. Crane leaned forward, fingers brushing the edge of his desk. "This town needs peace. You're young, you don't understand. Those papers, if they come out, everything collapses. Everyone will lose, even the innocent." She stayed silent, but in her mind, one line burned clear from the files. "Deal with Samuel before he transfers the files." And beneath it, his name, William Crane. Her breath caught. The judge, the man once trusted to uphold the law, the one who had shaken her uncle's hand at festivals, was the very one who had ordered his death. Crane continued, his voice softer but edged with steel. "You should hand them over. I'll keep you safe." As a courtesy to Samuel, his eyes narrowed, the warning plain. "If not, you'll follow him." The moment froze. Outside, church bells tolled, the sound dragging long and cold. In the wooden office, every mask fell away. The man revered most was the darkest shadow of all. She stepped back, clutching the iron chest. The warning note from last night, the dagger in her doorframe, the silent stares of the townsfolk, all converged here. Crane wasn't just a judge. He was the mastermind, the hand that had kept the town trembling for years. He leaned back, his smile gone, his voice flat as stone. "You have one last chance. Sell the house, leave, stay quiet, or you won't live long enough to regret it." Her heart pounded, but her eyes held steady. The truth was no longer blurred. Her uncle had died to bring these pages to light. And she, though only an ordinary young woman, now stood at the same crossroad. There was no turning back. The path of justice stretched clear before her, straight into a showdown with the town's most powerful man. That night, the sky was pitch black, thick clouds burying the moon and stars. The oil lamp flickered in the wooden house at the edge of town, its glow falling across the files spread wide on the table. She sat upright, eyes locked on every red seal, every repeated signature like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Beside her, the iron chest lay empty, as if it had spilt secrets buried for decades. From far off, hoofbeats echoed, at first scattered, then pounding hard. She rose and peered out the window. 3 men emerged from the darkness, their horses stopping at her porch. They dismounted, coats dark and wide-brimmed hats shading their faces. One pounded the door, the booming knock like a sentence pronounced. "Hand it over," he growled. "This ends tonight." She drew a deep breath, gripping her uncle's leather journal. Terror twisted inside her, but in her mind, she saw him falling, choosing to die rather than surrender the truth. He had held on and paid for it with his life. If she stayed silent, everything would end here. She opened the door. The 3 men stepped in, eyes cold as steel. The small room tightened with tension. One glanced at the files on the table, his hand drifting toward the pistol at his hip. "Give it up. If you don't, you won't live till morning." She raised the journal, voice steady. "Tomorrow, everything in here will be on the desk of the federal authorities. None of you can hide any longer." The room went still. Thunder rolled in the distance, as if the sky itself answered. Then, a voice rang out from the doorway, trembling but clear. "If you touch her, the whole town will know who you are." Mrs. Willa stepped in, oil lamp in hand, her eyes unwavering. Behind her, shapes appeared, townsfolk standing shoulder to shoulder. They carried no weapons, but their silence had broken. The men hesitated. In the lamplight, they saw they weren't facing just one girl, but an entire community watching. She set the journal on the table and lifted her chin. "He died protecting this truth," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "And I will not let that death be meaningless." A wave of whispers rippled from the porch. People who had bowed their heads for years were now raising them. For the first time, the truth was no longer locked behind 4 walls. The 3 men exchanged looks, then backed away. Not because they had lost their guns, but because they had lost the one thing they relied on most: the town's silence. That night, the balance of power shifted. A young woman, with her uncle's legacy, had lit a spark that brought an entire community to its feet. The small town stirred at dawn as if waking from a long nightmare. The fog thinned, revealing wooden houses bathed in golden light. Before the red brick courthouse, a crowd gathered. The files from the iron chest now lay spread in public view, every red seal, every forged signature exposed to the light. The townspeople went silent as the list of victims was read aloud. The Miller family lost their farm. The Browns were forced off their land. In the crowd, some wept as their names were spoken, finally hearing the truth of what they had endured in silence. Judge Crane, once so revered, was led out in shackles. His face no longer held a calm smile, only the blank stare of a man out of excuses. The townspeople watched him, their eyes stripped of fear, filled instead with years of pent-up anger. The young woman stood among them, clutching her uncle's leather journal. Mrs. Willa approached, laying a trembling hand on her shoulder. "You did what the rest of us couldn't," she whispered, her voice shaky but proud. Once stripped of his land, a middle-aged farmer stepped forward and pressed his hat against his chest. "You gave us back our voice," he said, his words breaking. Others nodded, their eyes fixed on her, not with doubt now, but with trust. The wooden house at the edge of town still stood, but it was no longer a symbol of fear. She chose to keep it, repair the roof, and scrub the windows. Sunlight filled the rooms where darkness had reigned. The iron chest, now empty, sat neatly on the mantel as a relic of what had been uncovered. She sat on the porch each evening, gazing across the fields where the wind blew free. No more eyes watching, no whispers warning. Only a peace built from courage and truth. Her uncle's legacy wasn't the house, nor even the papers. It was the lesson. Justice could be buried, but a future generation would always come to dig it up, if they were brave enough. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, the last rays cut through the window, stretching across the wooden floor that had once hidden the secret. She smiled softly, knowing the house was no longer a burden. It had become a heritage home, holding memory, truth, and faith for an entire community. If you believe truth and justice should never be buried, join us at Humankind Stories. Subscribe, share, and help keep this flame alive.